this is such a powerful reminder that I need to be listening to my podcast and auditing myself. So I'll do that on different platforms. I will self-audit and I'll look as much as I can, look objectively.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
What's up, podcaster? Today, I am back with Julie Hawley, and I'm stoked from The Conscious Investor. Today, we're actually going to listen to her podcast and do a little bit of coaching call where I just listen blindly. Is it called blind? Would it be called deaf? I'm going to listen deafly.
But then you're listening.
Yeah, I don't know how to explain it. I'm going to listen blind, meaning I hadn't heard this before. You'll be able to hear my authentic coaching and whatever happens. And basically, Julie's been wanting to know, like, Adam, what can you do to help me improve the podcast? Is there anything that I'm doing wrong? Is there anything that you're noticing? And so we're going to just do that for you right now. So we're actually going to play clips of The Conscious Investor. And we'll definitely link to The Conscious Investor. Julie Hawley is a friend, been a friend for a couple of years. Now we're actually working with her. We're doing all the editing, post-production, marketing, all the back office stuff for the podcast. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to go through that. But first, Miss Julie, what's an update on how the podcast is doing?
Well, the update today, the forecast is bright and cheery. The podcast is going really well, and I've been really pleased with the continual growth. I think if you listen to previous episodes, I'm not into fast growth. I'm into slow, stable, steady, just like in my real estate investing. Same thing here when it comes to growing my podcast. I don't want to have a bunch of listeners come and then they go. I want to retain my listeners. So, when we started, we were talking about this before we hit record. And when we started, I was, averaging, I think around 115, 118 or so downloads on the Buzzsprout predictor, right? And so we have to have some consistent metric that we're returning to. And I want to encourage everyone listening, you have to have one zone of measurement so that you understand what you're measuring all the time. So that's what I'm using as just my quick and dirty, like, let me check. I've hit some spikes recently where the predictor was 370, high 370s, almost 380s. And so I'm averaging on the predictor right around 340 now. And I think that's really great. I always like to catch you off guard with some great news.
Oh, so good. I can't wait.
I know. So here's some fun news. One of my friends and I were talking podcasting, and she was saying she was just at this event at FinCon and went to this whole little breakout on podcasting. And they said, if you have a 30% drop-off rate, your content is not doing well. If you retain your listeners, like that 30 to 70%, then you're doing really well with your listeners and you're retaining them. And that's high fives, you're doing great. And anything above 80% is you are smoking hot, you are killing it, keep going with your great content. So I was thinking about what she said. Buzzsprout didn't offer those type of metrics. And that hasn't been a metric I've been looking at. So I went into Apple Podcasts and I started looking at some of the more data on the podcast. And I was really pleased that I was in the retention zone was 50, 60%. So the content that gave me a little boost of confidence. Like, okay, Julie, your content is good. How do you make it better? And that's where we are today. This is going to be painful, by the way. It's already hard enough, like hearing yourself, but then hearing yourself and getting honest feedback, which I only want honest feedback because
and it's recorded for the world, thousands of people to hear. I mean, no, you're not supposed to say that. For our one listener to hear.
That's right. You are our one.
We don't want my listener, the one that I have, the one that's listening right now, that you hear me. We don't want you thinking that there's all these other people. It's just you.
It's
you
just
and
you.
Us. All right. I also don't want Julie to think that because she's going to freak out. All right. So to repeat what you've said, you basically, when we started, you were like at 115, 118 downloads per episode. Then you kind of slowly moved up to like the 300 mark. And then now you're kind of getting some spikes in the high-ish 300s and the mid 300s. And the last you checked, it was like around 340. So that just shows that it's growing and not growing crazy. It's growing. And not only that, but you also, when your friend came back from FinCon and she wrote down some of these numbers with a 30% drop-off rate is terrible, 30 to 70, or I guess this is retention rate. The drop-off rate would be the opposite, probably, right?
Yeah.
So we'll call it a retention rate. 30 is
that's
bad.
A better way.
30 to 70 is good. And
you.
Above 80 retention is smoking hot. And you're pretty close to smoking hot at that 50 to 60. You're in the middle of the good. And it's nice to know. One thing that I'll point out is we are doing paid advertising for your podcast. And when you do a lot of paid advertising, we're getting in front of people that don't know you. They didn't know you from Adam, to use what my dad used to always like to say, because my name's Adam. So he would say that all the time, but they don't know you from Adam. And so they're not sure like who you are. They're just getting involved. And the retention rates and drop-off rates are probably going to be higher during the period that we're doing paid advertising. The listen scores are probably going to be a little bit lower during paid advertising because we've got all these newcomers that are like, what is this ad that I'm seeing? Should I check it out? Some of them do. And when they do, mostly, I think that's going to show worse. It's going to while it's kind of confusing, it's like it's going to show these statistics more badly when we're doing marketing because we're getting in front of people that don't know you. And so
window
to
shoppers.
See that you're still 50 to 60, you're so close to that smoking hot range is kind of impressive. And you're definitely not on that 30% retention. So that's pretty cool. So let's jump in. I've got one of the episodes queued up. And if you're listening, the episode is actually in the show notes. It's an episode where Julie had Kent Ritter on, and we're going to listen from the beginning. We're not going to listen to the entire thing. We'll skip around. We'll pause. So if you want to listen to just the whole thing, you'll listen to it after. But we are going to do this as a coaching call in 3, 2, 1.
You just have to understand the fact.
First and foremost, I'm noticing the unique artwork for the episode. So this is important to pull out and make sure that the listener understands, our one listener, not the thousands of people listening, but the one person, that when we have podcast artwork, you're going to come up with one artwork, and that's going to basically be your podcast logo. But is a little bit of extra work to do this, but beneficial. And Julie, I see she has this. And what it is, and I know our team is doing this, and so kudos to us, we're the best. Anyway, what I'm noticing is the artwork changed from the main artwork that you have to an episode artwork. So it's uploaded, and this is beautiful. What I like is Kent's name is right at the top. It has the thing that everybody wants to see and hear, and it says moving forward without fear and investing in multifamily. And so that's like, oh, that gives the people the thing that they're looking for. And then there's your face and Kent's face. And then it just says in real small words, the conscious investor with Julie Holly. So it's very, very, very good looking. Another thing that I love about this artwork that I'm looking at, it takes the fonts that you're using, they go ahead and they use the way that one of those fonts is, and they put it in. So even though it's not exactly your regular artwork, they're keeping with the branding by putting that same font. It's kind of like a cursive font, and they're putting that in for the episode artwork. And so it's really well done. This is one thing that I'm noticing. It was hard for me to find this episode with Kent. It was a challenge because there's not an episode number. And so what I would like to do is I would like to have you for now on have the episode number on the artwork and as part of the title in a way. So it's like part of the title, or if you are really against it becoming part of the title, because some people are, and there's a lot of people that feel like the episode number shouldn't be part of the title. And so we'll give them the benefit of doubt. And we'll say, if that's where you are, let's at least put the episode number as the first couple of words in the show notes. So it basically shows up in episode 31, or actually you're in the 300s now. So we'll just call this one episode 311. I don't know what number it is because it doesn't have one, but I'll pretend it's 311. So in episode 311, blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense so far?
Okay, so I'm going to speak for our one listener who is starting their podcast because I was there. It's 300 episodes away, but I remember wrestling with this. Adam, it was intense. I was doing all sorts of research. Should I have the number as, should I actually use the number in the title? Should I not? I actually used to have a number and then I went through and I changed everything. And so I was wrestling with that concept of, do I go with the number? Do I go with the title and how? So, looking at SEO, looking at all these different angles. So this is really great guidance. Now, do you think that I should actually go back and have my assistant go through and change? That's one of the things that, I have an amazing assistant and just have him go back to the beginning and just start 1, 2, 3.
Well, honestly, if you're going to call back or call forward to episodes, if you're going to say if you're going to say the episode with Kent was great, people are like, I can't find, how do I find that? Yeah. Where is it? And they're scrolling and scrolling. And when you make it challenging for people, the only reason that I scrolled is because I'm getting paid to scroll. The only reason I spent all this time going to find. Now, Julie, I like you as a person.
That special cheese,
I like you as a person. But let me just say, the reason why I spent the extra time and effort, because I give up when things are hard. Yeah. And a lot of other people give up when things are hard. When it's how am I going to find this? You scroll and scroll and scroll. I got annoyed. I got bothered. I got tired of it. I got distracted. And I'm like, maybe I don't need to find that episode. But if you make it real easy for me to find the episode, it's 321. And then I scroll and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm in the 350s. Now I need to go, I'm in the 330s. I'm 329, 87654 321. Boom, I found it. Yeah, that makes it easy. And so I think that having it somewhere, it does make sense. And I get with the SEO, there's a lot of people that say that. We generally put the episode number, even though people say about the SEO. Let's just keep going. I think I will just say I'll repeat one thing. If you don't want it in the title for SEO, you can put it as the first couple of words in the description, like the show notes, where it basically says in episode 321, and I don't know if this is the actual number. In episode 321, we're talking with Kent Ritter about. And so it basically is the show notes, but it sneaks that in. So because of the real estate, I call it real estate, because if you have McDonald's isn't a burger company, they're a real estate company. McDonald's makes money, well, two reasons. One, because basically they rent out their things to their spots. They buy the real estate and then they rent out the people run the businesses. But the other point about the real estate is you don't find a McDonald's in a shitty area. You just don't find a McDonald's, maybe in a poor area, but not in an area where there's no exposure. There's nobody that's going to find you. They want to be where it's busy, where it's seen. It's off a freeway. It's off of an exit. It's on a corner. It's all of these things, because that's where it's going to get seen. And when I say high prime real estate, what I mean by that is the title and the first two lines. Remember this, if you're listening, the title and the first two lines are prime real estate. That's where you want the stuff that's really going to be compelling. So you have the ability to be able to put that episode number in the first two lines of the show notes instead of the title if you want. Let's just keep listening.
Wait, can I ask one more question?
Okay.
Is it advantageous? Because we're gonna wrap this up with a bow for the one listener this is meaningful. I've heard on some podcasts they'll say, I might say something like, this is a conscious investor podcast episode number 311. Is it worthwhile saying that in the podcast also, or is it just I am just buttoning down the hatches.
The only reason that I think that that would matter is if you were hoping that the listener was taking, wow, 300 episodes. That's great. Like if you are hoping that it's kind of like, I call it brainwashing. That's just like the easiest way to say it because it sticks in the minds of the person listening. When you say that it's brainwashing, it's basically suggesting, it's basically you say things over and over and over. Like, this is episode 321, this is episode 322, this is episode 333. The more they keep hearing that you're in the 300s and then 400s and then 500s or, the 50s and then 60s and then 70s, the more the listener can kind of feel like you are here to stay. They can trust you. They know that you're not going anywhere. And it can be beneficial for that one reason, but I don't see there being any other benefit. I think it's more of drawback for other reasons, just because that first few words is valuable prime real estate. You really want to call your listener out. Today, when we started recording for this coaching call, I thought about our listener and I thought about what's in it for them. Like, why do they care? And it's like, today we're going to be listening to this thing. You're going to get some value. And that's what I said first. I didn't say, my name is Adam Abel Adams. I grew up in Kaysville, Utah. Now I live in Denver. I got my college degree, whatever. I've got 2 kids. They don't give a F about all these little statistics that most new podcasters are like, oh, I've got to make sure that they know I have a master's degree. Oh, I've got to let them know that I've been in real estate investing for 14 years. Oh, I've got to let those things don't matter to the listener. What matters to the listener is we're going to listen to this. We're going to show you how we do this. You're going to get some value. And it's like, that is important. It doesn't matter if I have a college degree or if I've been podcasting for a certain amount of years or that I have kids or that I like Jeeping or mountain biking or whatever. Those things don't matter as much. They can come out so that the listener's like, oh, I like mountain biking too. I can resonate. Ooh, I've got a Jeep. I like Adam. They can come out peppered in along the way, but they don't have to be in the very beginning just wasting valuable prime real estate. Can we play? Can we push play?
Thank you.
All right. She's giving me the thumbs up. So here we go in 3, 2, 1.
Inflation is actually a positive in our microcosm of what we do. Just have to understand the factors. And I think the more you educate yourself and understand really what's going on, the more you start to be able to see the opportunities among the fear.
If you're interested.
One thing that I love, 2 things that I love about that so far, 3 things. 4 things. Here we go. His mic sounds good. I like that. That intro was 14 and a half seconds, less than 15 seconds. We always say 17 seconds or less. You want to capture. 3rd, good content, interesting. It's like, ooh, what's kind of going on? I might be interested in this, and it's kind of hooks you. It's a teaser. And the 4th thing that I liked is that the music started to come after a few seconds, so that you knew that this is, oh, we're about to get into something good. So those are the things that I've noticed. We're at 16 seconds. Let's push play.
In how highly successful investors overcome limitations and become unstoppable forces of success, you're in the right place.
The thing that I don't like right now is the volume of the music compared to the volume of your voice. We usually want to say let's just say that the voice is a 10. I mean, the voice should be at the loudest level that it's supposed to be. It's our 10. If that's the case, we want the music to probably be a 2 or something like that, maybe a 3. But in this case, you've got the music at like a 5.5 and the voice at a 10. And that seems like it would be okay, but it's actually kind of hard to clearly understand what you're saying. So this is a giant mistake that most podcasters make, most editors make. Apparently, if my team created this, then we made this mistake too. She's saying, no, my team didn't. I'm shaking
my head. No, you amazing listener out there. I'm saying no, because I'm like, Grow Your Show. I want to be very clear because Grow Your Show is doing so much for the Conscious Investor podcast. So it's good to know. Okay, great. And this is why I am partnered with Grow Your Show, because it's like, I want to grow. I want to improve. So this is powerful feedback.
All right. So the volume of your music is probably a little too loud for the volume of your voice. But let's keep going. 24 seconds here.
The Conscious Investor podcast features weekly conversations with real estate investing experts and delivers a Monday mindset episode to help launch your week with intention. If you believe success is for
I still just am noticing that music, it just seems like it's in the way.
Everyone willing to think, then do, these conversations will be your weekly rocket fuel. Conscious Investors.
Okay. So if it started at about the 15-ish second mark, now we're at the 44 second. So it's about a 29-second introduction. I actually want, if you are willing to re-record that, you and I can just sit down. We can pull out the copy that you already had, like whatever the copy, the script, we can pull out the intro that you have here, which is good, has a lot of great things. And what we need to do is trim the fat. And basically saying like, we need to cut out anything that's just not as important. So we can probably pull this down. The goal is going to be 15 seconds for that whole thing. But even though that's the goal, we'll be okay if it ends up being 20, 22 seconds. We'll be okay. But we want to get it as low as we possibly can, as close to 15 seconds. Right now it's at 29 seconds, approximately. Your intro is about 29. And that's better than most podcasters. I get pissed and I laugh at and I make fun of, and I'm making fun of probably our listener. They might actually have a 3-minute episode because when they think that they have to tell everything, they think that they got to get it all out. This is important. This is important. Going back to what we said before, I've got 2 kids. I like mountain biking. I like Jeeping. I have a degree. I've been podcasting for this many years. I've helped this many people. It's like, who cares? Who cares about all this stuff? What does the listener need to know? What's going to hook the listener? What's going to make the listener say, this podcast is for me? And I think there's just probably, most likely, especially if it's 30 or 29 seconds, or even many podcasters are 1, 2, 3, 4 minutes because they want to get every bit of information. It probably can get down to 15, 20, 21, 22 seconds if we go over it. So let's do that, Julie. Let's do that.
Let's definitely do that. And for you listeners, if you want to go back to episode 15 or episode 20, you can hear different introductions. I've worked on the introduction over 300 episodes. You can only imagine. I've tried different techniques. Oh, okay. I'm going to create a 30-second intro because someone can hit the 30-second skip ahead and skip it if they're a seasoned listener, because I do that. So I've tried different things and I love this. And I would absolutely, yes, we're going to trim the fat and we're going to clean this up.
Let me just do this right now. Let's just listen to it another time. And I'll just pause and tell you which things I think might be the fat versus the meat. Here we go.
Love it.
Opportunities among the fear.
If you're interested in how highly...
Okay. If you're interested in how highly successful, what I'm liking already is we are calling out the avatar. We are speaking to the person that you want to speak to. So I love how it starts so far. If you're this person, let's hear how it keeps going.
Successful investors overcome limitations and become unstoppable forces of success. You're in the right place. The Conscious Investor podcast.
So that is the hook, and this is becoming the story. In this podcast, and our listeners probably heard it a few times, we talk about hook, story, offer. Hook, story, offer. It's like you first want to call out the person. You want to surprise them. You want to give them a statistic, like 30% of the people stay, 30 to 70 is good, 80%. It's like these things jog our minds. They make us start to think. So we want to get a hook. And you had a hook. The hook was maybe even too long. Maybe it doesn't need to be as long. Maybe we can look at that again and say, what are the 2 quick things that they really need to know? Like, who is my avatar? So I think we can spend more time on what you've said so far. And now you're about to say, now you're going into the story. Now you're talking about the conscious investor is.
features weekly conversations with real estate investing experts and delivers a Monday Mindset episode to help launch your week with intention. If you believe success is for everyone willing to think, then do, these conversations will be your weekly rocket fuel. Conscious invest.
If you believe that people should think and then do, this will be your weekly rocket fuel. One thing that I like about it is subliminal messaging, brainwashing, where you're basically telling the person that they're going to listen every single week. That's one thing that I really like about it. It's very subtle, but the listener will naturally say, I'm supposed to listen to this every week. I really liked that. Honestly, I think it needs a makeover. I don't want to just tweak a couple things. I want to re-look at what's important, who the avatar is, figure out what is the one thing that they really need to know. And let's not give them as much of that other information. I think it's going to spend more time on coaching this intro to get it down to 15, 20, 21, 22 seconds.
I love it.
Let's keep listening.
Sirs, welcome.
You said real estate investors, welcome.
Oh my gosh.
Here's what I don't like about that. It's you are not being personal with the person who's listening. I make the mistake sometimes. I think I made it once or twice already on this episode. As we think about creating content, we want to think about creating content for a person, not for people. We want to speak to someone, not to an audience. Technically, there's an audience. I'm just going to say to my one listener right now, I'm sorry, technically, you're not the only one actually listening, but I do my best to speak to you. There's other people probably listening, right? But you definitely are, and I'm having a conversation with you. So Julie, when you're on here, it's not, hey, listeners, hey, investors. Just when I start this episode, I think I said, what's up, podcaster?
You did.
So one person, I've got that one person.
So I oftentimes will call out, I'll refer to audience members as, the hey, conscious investors. And so I just need to take the plural off and just say, so it's just singular. It's just that one amazing conscious investor.
Yeah, that's how I think that's a better way to look at it. Yeah.
That is such a subtle move to make things more personal. I love it.
Let's keep listening.
Oh my gosh. Every time I open up an episode, that I always say, I have the best friends. I have the best guests, and I'm just absolutely blessed in that way. But last week, or maybe the week before, Kit and I recorded a podcast episode on his podcast. So we'll drop a link to that so you can go and listen to that, because it's going to be a very different conversation. And this week we're recording on the conscious investor. In fact, I think we have, spoiler, we may do some one-off short little tidbits to splatter over social media. We're kind of joking around about it, but it might become real.
This is an opinion. Mm-hmm. The way that I look at it is there's probably 80% of podcasters. That's not a real statistic. It's just what I think. There's probably 80% of the people that I listen to and hear, they start a lot of their podcast episodes out. Here's another thing. I'm interviewed on many podcasts. I've probably been on 200 or 300 podcasts in the last 4 years, which isn't crazy, but it's a lot. And it drives me effing bonkers every single time that I'm interviewed on somebody's podcast and they say something like, I always say this. I always say I have a good guest, and today's a really good guest. But there's just really no reason for it. And they probably say it almost every single time. The only benefit that you might possibly get is that one guest is man, she really thinks I'm special. That's the only benefit you might get. But you don't have to do it by talking about all the other guests and putting them down. You can just say, this guest is really special, and it works, and it's fast, and it's easy. So oftentimes,
so much smoother.
Yeah, instead of I always say this, but this one's actually true. It's so she's not authentic usually. She's a bullshitter every other episode. It's just it's very subtle. It's just very small, but if you come into it and just say, I'm really excited about this guest, Kent Ritter, I was on his show, and you get rid of some of that fat. Here we go.
And it might be very insightful as well as entertaining. But I have no doubt that you're going to appreciate a nice, deep conversation here, as well as learning.
I have no doubt you're going to appreciate an insightful conversation here. That's speaking to a listener. That's great.
More about investing in a wild market. So without further ado, Kent, welcome. It's so nice to have you on The Conscious Investor.
Thanks, Julie. I'm so happy to be here. I've listened to your show for quite a while, and as I've gotten to get to know you.
My opinion is, I'm going to say so much here.
This is why we're doing this.
Instead of like giving him the mic right there, instead of being like, Kent Ritter, welcome, but like not having anything after that and just going to silence, what that does to Kent is gets him to say whatever he wants. And you don't know what he's going to say. And the fact might be that he said really good stuff. That might be true. However, if you're in the habit of just being like, welcome, or how's your day, or I'm glad you're here, and then you say nothing, then you leave it up to chance on if it's good or bad. A better way to do it is, Kent, I'm so excited to have you. My first question is, and then you just ask a question. And then his response is what you're saying, not whatever the heck he wants. So let's keep listening.
That's gold.
I'm just excited every time we talk. So I'm really, really grateful to be here today.
It's amazing. I'm like, wow, someone of your caliber listening to my show. No offense of fellow conscious investors, but you know.
Apparently there's high caliber people listening to your show. Look at this.
Wow. You know how it is? Have you ever had that experience where we don't always know who's listening to our show? Now, I'm blessed, right? Many of you have already left comments and you've over on YouTube, or you've left a review over on Apple or something like that. And if you haven't, please go leave something honest, even if you don't.
I like all this. It's authentic. It's real. It's personal. It shows your personality. It shows gratitude. It shows that you pay attention to your listener. This is all really good. Like, it's all really well done. And it is, I also like how it's saying, to me, it's almost like it's obvious that you work with kids. Either you're a teacher, elementary, or you have your own grade school age kids that you've been rearing up. The reason I say that is I'm used to, now that I'm a father, and I actually, my degree is in education. Like, I literally went to school for education, and we were taught to do that as well. But it's almost hard not to. So they would say, if like a kid's acting up, you go and you just stand by them. You don't even say a dang word to them. You just go, you just do your same lesson, but you just stand by that desk. And it just gets them to pay more attention. They're not going to be talking to other people. You don't have to yell. You don't have to say, why are you being, you just stand by them and just keep doing what you're doing. Another thing that I have learned to do as well is I compliment one of my kids. One of the kids is not doing what they want. Instead of me saying, damn you, you need to do blah, 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 I just say to the other kid, man, I really appreciate that I don't even have to ask you to help me with the dishes. Thanks, man. And then the other kid's like, oh, I'm going to go and help with the dishes. So it's kind of what you're doing here. You're saying, I've read your review. I've heard you reach out, and I really appreciate it. If you haven't done it, you can, like, it's like, oh, I want to be called out. I want to be that good person. So it kind of helps them. Let's get back in.
Let me know an honest evaluation. But unless somebody does that, how do you really know who's listening to your show?
Yeah, it is a strange thing about podcasts. Like, you really don't have much insight into your audience. You can see kind of countries and places that they're at, but yeah, you don't really know. So it always kind of throws me off when I'll have, like, I was at my niece's high school graduation party, like a couple of weeks ago, and somebody came up to me as like a friend of a friend or whatever. And they're like, oh, I just love your show. I listen to it all the time. And I'm like, really? Wow.
See,
cool.
exactly.
Thank you.
Really?
Yeah,
I would say it's starting to feel too much about podcasting. To me, it's getting to that place where it's starting to be a little bit too much about podcasting on a real estate show. Now, here on this show, like Let's talk about that stuff for minutes and it'll be okay. For your listener, I think they're starting to feel like at this 2 minutes and 48 seconds mark, I haven't got a whole bunch of value yet. This is talking a lot about podcasting. I came here for real estate. So I would just be cautious of like how much time you're willing to put toward banter and getting to know people versus what is the value that the listener's going to get.
What?
Great.
I did not even know. I just thought you were a number somewhere.
Yeah. And now they're buying rentals and they're doing all this. And they're like, yeah, your show is great. And I was like, that's kind of why we do it. So it makes you feel good. But yeah, you never know. You never know all the people you're impacting.
That's just it. Like every time, if you look at the downloads per episode or something, you're thinking like, that was like a room full of that many people. And they all heard this message. I wonder what it's going to do in their lives. Like, how cool is that?
It's very cool. But having the podcast, I had zero expectations when I started. I thought,
now I'm really thinking it's going too far into podcasts. But let's keep playing.
It was going to go nowhere, honestly. Those are my own limiting beliefs.
I like your self-belief right there.
Yeah, no, it was 100% my own limiting belief of like, but honestly.
Think about your avatar. Think about what they're thinking. Think about their wanting. Think about what they're struggling with and deliver that. There's a lot of good things about banter and it can be used well. However, with this episode right here on this type of podcast at the 3 minute and 33 mark, we should be getting stuff about real estate investing, conscious investor. We should be thinking about what does my person really, really need? So I think this goes back to the welcome and then the pause. And then it's just like, we'll just play around. But we kind of want to get serious about what does the listener need to know? And so like when we get into that first question, you'll say, I think our listener wants to hear how you did XYZ. Would you mind going into how you approached your real estate investing? And don't be afraid also, Julie, as you're paying attention to this, as you're noticing this, don't be afraid to derail a guest. Like, for example, this is great. You never know who's listening. Let's jump into my first question with you. And that's okay. Just like move it along. And you hear me, and I think the listener hears as well.
And you do. I just want to say, one, you're doing a fantastic job. Listen, you hear how you're trying to be so delicate. I'm like, oh, you're being so gracious. Like I'm hearing you loud and clear. And I'm so, so, so grateful because I want to improve. So, and I love that permission to be like, I need to be a stronger director, a stronger leader on the show.
I feel like you're not the only podcast host that cares a lot about how their guest feels about them. I'm pretty sure you're not alone. Our listener today needed to hear it too. You should get that permission. You should feel the permission that I have a purpose. I'm here to serve somebody, and it's not always your guest. It's not always your guest.
It should always be the listener.
I think that it's a podcast. The listener's there for a reason. Give them what they want. Let's keep going.
Honestly, it's added so much value to my life of just having interactions like that, but even like on a broader scale of people reaching out to me and sending messages like that, telling me how it's impacted them or that they learned about this technique. They're now doing it on one of their properties or something like that. That's so fulfilling. Cool. Yeah, it's cool.
Like that missing link. You get to be part of the missing link for someone in their journey. I think cool.
It's such a great medium to be able to just like, anybody like me can just grab a mic and start talking about stuff. And
you don't even have to be a late night DJ or anything.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
It is pretty interesting how audiences grow and are cultivated and culture is cultivated, and we all attract our tribes. And that's what's interesting about it is like, it's a tribe. It just attracts like-minded people.
What are you thinking right now?
I'm surprised I'm not beat red. I'm like, oh dear God, are you trying to be Adam Adams podcast for podcasting, Julie Holly? Like run a freaking real estate.
It's funny because all of this stuff is really good for our listener today. Like all of what you're talking about is really great for our listener today. That's for sure.
Actually, it really is.
All of this is like a really good combo for our person. Well, let's keep listening. Just FYI, we're at the 4-minute and 24 mark.
It's way too long.
And I haven't got any value about real estate investing yet.
Some dips into people using techniques that they've heard. There's no saving. This ship has sailed. It's
let's keep playing because here we go.
And everyone gets to grow.
And that's why I think so many different podcasts are important, because like one of my limiting beliefs when I was going to start one was there's a million out there. Like, what am I going to say that somebody else hasn't already said? And it's actually Joe Fairless that got me over that hump. And he said, look, he's like, it's not about what you're going to say. It's about how you're going to say it, because there's going to be people out there, like you said, your tribe, that are going to resonate with you, that don't resonate with me, that maybe don't like my show, but they're going to like you and they're going to like how you say it. And so it's all about, that was what really made me be like, you know what? Yeah, like I should do this because I think I can speak to.
We are slightly past the 5-minute mark. I'm going to fast forward a bit and just see what else we can talk about that's not this. Here we go.
Here's another takeaway real fast.
Yeah.
Is that I used to listen to my own podcast religiously because my first year I self-edited. And when I stopped self-editing, I stopped becoming a regular listener of my own podcast. And this is such a powerful reminder that I need to be listening to my podcast and auditing myself. So I'll do that on different platforms. I will self-audit and I'll look as much as I can, look objectively. Okay, I'm, Susie Q, and I'm just going to go and look. And I used to do that so much better as a listener on my own podcast. I still do it, but it's not a regular practice. And I need to be doing that.
Good stuff. All right. I fast forwarded it by 45 seconds. So now we're at the 5:48. Here we go.
Has to cross in order to have their content put out there.
Yeah, I think.
Wow, it's still going. I didn't expect that. All right, well, let's just keep hearing it.
The podcast was definitely a place of a lot of personal growth.
I'm going to go forward a little more.
As far as the most important thing, I think consistency with the podcast. And so
I'm going to go more.
You have to hear yourself. And so
I'm going to go more.
Watch it. And the whole room would critique you.
I'm going to go more.
Is that point of growth, of that level of learning to be that vulnerable in life and to receive.
Okay, we're at the 7-minute, 55-second mark. This is where I think it's going to transition to something. That's a long time not helping your listener. All right, here we go. We're going to push play.
I abandoned. Let's coin a phrase right now. No, this is like abandoning your avatar abandonment. So we need you need a sticker that is like no AA, like you're, AAA, no AA, no avatar abandonment.
There we go. All right, here we go. We're pushing play at the 7:55.
Raw, but it was also one of the best, I think, learning experiences because you have to do uncomfortable things like that to get better.
Okay, that's really interesting because that is that point of growth, of that level of learning to be that vulnerable in life and to receive the feedback not as criticism.
I love that I think we're still talking about podcasting, but what I really like is how right now you're showing the listener how is this conversation important to them. So you found a way to say, this is important. I'm noticing this. And this is great. Let's keep pushing.
Almost 8 minutes in.
We're at 8:14. I'm going to push
8
play.
8 minutes and 14 seconds in.
Here we go.
But as constructive criticism.
Mm-hmm.
These people are here. They're not here to tear me down. They're going to build me up. It's no different than having an editor send you your article that's bleeding red. And they're
that's right.
You get used to it. And now it's like the highest compliment. No, you're being honest with me and you're giving me honest feedback because you want me to succeed. But that's one of those growing curves in life. Do you think everybody gets to experience that? Or do you think our population is kind of scattered?
No. No, I think most people are in those situations. I don't think most people seek out feedback enough. And I think it's something you really have to seek out, because I think most people, like, this is a lesson I learned when I had a bunch of employees, right? And it was really resonated with me. It was like, look, because most people are really bad at giving feedback, and most people not even are really bad at giving feedback, just don't give feedback. And so most employees never hear what they're doing wrong. And then they get an evaluation, because you can sit behind your scorecard on evaluation and then pass it, you pass it over, and they get a bad score. And they're like,
I'm going to fast forward a little bit. It's so there's good value. There's good things. You did take that time to show the listener like how this conversation could apply to them. And then it got back into just kind of like derailing. It's like off the rails. It's that I don't mean it in a rude way.
You're not.
But the train's not necessarily feedback on the right track right now. It's kind of like going somewhere, but the train doesn't even know where it's going. But if it's on the track, then we're going to be moving it forward, and things are going to be making the most amount of sense. So we are at 9 minutes, 20 seconds. I'm going to push play.
What the heck? I never heard about any of this.
Fast forward.
It's not. I think you have to seek out feedback. I think everybody should.
Forward again.
I mean, not everybody, even if you
fast forward again.
Yeah, because I do, because I'm actually that person.
Well, one, if they say no, then there's no point telling them in the first place, because they're not going to listen. There's something nice in there too. It doesn't have to be
blunt at times and very deliberate. And
it seems so nice and like fortitude, right? And I think if you're conditioned,
I'm curious about closing deals.
All right. 13 minutes, 43 seconds. And we're starting to talk about real estate. All right.
Okay. So as much as we were derailed, as much as we were not, it was me. I am the host of this show, and it is my responsibility to deliver amazing content for the conscious investor. So then there is the balance, right? Of the conscious investor is real estate investing and mindset. It's like this beautiful combination. So I think that I have to zero in and be very conscientious and deliberate about that conversation, so that it is either wholeheartedly serving one, and if it's starting to go sideways or something, I've got to get it back.
Yeah. And I think, like, if you're always thinking about the listener, like who that avatar is. I try to think about our listener today. Like, we're doing a coaching call, but I take time to take time to talk to the listener, even in you and I's conversation. So you and Kent's conversation, you so far just having conversation just with him. I mean, there was that point where you're like, I think a lot of people can get something out of this. That was like at the 8-minute mark or so. We're at the 13:43, and this is the time where it's getting into real estate. There was some other mindset stuff that you're like, I'm loving this. And then you speak to the conscious investor, to the listener. If you're listening and you heard Kent say XYZ, I hope you're writing this down. I hope you're paying attention, because blah, 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 blah. And then you get into the next question, or then you ask another question. Each question, it will be beneficial for you when going into them, when thinking about them, when asking them, addressing them, that you're trying to find a way to say the question so that the listener's paying the most amount of attention. So that they're like, ooh, I'm about to get some value. Ooh, she's about to ask this one thing. Ooh, I'm supposed to hear the 3 things that whatever is involved. But this is like the first time it's getting into real estate. There was other mindset stuff, except I don't believe that normally, like 95% of the time, that whatever that mindset stuff was, I don't think it was like brought to the listener in a way that was tangible. So for example, let's talk about mama bird and baby bird. The baby bird eats a worm, but the mama bird has to go and chew that worm up and spit it into the mouth of the baby bird. They don't just take this giant worm. The mama's like, all right, I know what's up. I've been here before. I've been eating worms all my life. My jaw is strong as hell. but like my baby's not there yet. I've got to spoon feed my baby. I've got to beak feed my baby. I've got to grab that worm, got to chew it up. That we do mashed sweet potatoes and mashed apples and mashed peas for our kids, and the mama bird does mashed worm for their kid. They don't just give them a worm and say, look, figure out how to eat it, man. I've been eating these for years. You can freaking eat that. They chew it up and they give it bite size and they say, here, how does that? Is that going to work? And that's what we do with our listener. We play mama bird and baby bird with our listener. We say, all right, Kent is saying these really great gems, but I'm not sure if the listener's like picking them up the way that I think that they should be thinking about it. So you go and then take the value that he's saying, and then you come up with a brand new, never used analogy like mama bird and baby bird. I've never used that on the podcast before, but I'm trying to think of my listener who is a podcaster, who's hearing this stuff, who's hearing the meat from you and me having this conversation. And then I have to say, what is the most relatable, easy, memorable way to give this to the listener or to give this to my coaching client today so that it will stick? And so that tomorrow, when she does her next episode, she thinks about mama bird and baby bird and has more value than she did yesterday. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, 1,000,000%.
All right, let's push play.
So simple.
In quote wild market that we're in and everything, and you're out golfing and checking your phone and make sure.
One random thing that I would say, this definitely applies to about half of the podcasts out there. And what we're really talking about is the things that are evergreen and the things that are time sensitive. And I want you to balance evergreen and time sensitive stuff. I want your podcast to have value in 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2075. Instead of saying like, we're in a quote unquote, blah, blah, blah market. In 3 years, is that still going to be evergreen? Is that still going to add value? The way that I do it is I say something like this. It doesn't matter when you're listening to this. I go and I speak to my listener. I spoon feed, I beak feed my baby bird. I basically say, look, it doesn't matter when you're listening to this. The market could be up, the market could be down. As we're recording it, we're in a crazy market. We want it to be where it wouldn't matter when they're listening. They wouldn't feel like they've missed out on something. And I feel like this is approaching the verge of man, it's too bad I'm listening to this in 2095 because none of this matters to me anymore. Whatever she's saying happened 30 years ago, 70 years ago, 2 years ago, 6 months ago. Man, he mentioned a guy named Joe Fairless. Joe got a whole bunch of flack because when COVID happened, way back then when COVID was happening, Joe never addressed those changes with his listener. And so these people that were highly educated real estate investors that wanted to always be on the cutting edge didn't know any of that. But then if you only do COVID, like if all you're talking about is COVID, or we'll say swine flu, in a whole bunch of years, that doesn't matter so much if you're just talking about COVID. So the way you got to finesse it, and you got to say, look, right now, as we're recording this, we're going through a pandemic. There's always different types of pandemics, things that bring real estate up, the things that bring them down. And regardless of global things that happen, there's also things that might be just happening in your city. Because of that, I think you should really be paying attention regardless of when you hear this. And now the listener's like, oh, this matters. Even if I'm listening in 2095, 75 years after 2020, for example. Does that make sense?
I am just like, it's so genius. So listener, if you aren't already working with Grow Your Show and Adam, I think that you can see the tremendous value. I mean, like, I'm confident that I'm taking tons of notes over here as to, great, when I'm recording podcasts, I need to have these things front and center, like the sticky notes all around my computer screen, just to keep me like really zeroed in. And that also is interesting because that's so funny. I was just listening to a podcast this weekend. My husband wanted me to listen to it. And the person is a very top tier. I cannot remember everybody would know who it is. Like the super, like in the world, like top 0.5% podcast in the whole world. And he was saying, like, you have to be willing to do what other people aren't willing to do. And on my notes the other day, I wrote down, like, what is my one more? What do I need to be doing? How do I level up my game on my podcast? And this right here is just like, oh, I just feel like it's quenching my thirst.
Let's keep going. Ready?
I don't know what your par was for the day and I don't golf, so maybe I used that thing correctly, but I hope it was still solid. I hope your game is still good.
No, I'll be brutally honest. If there were 4 holes, I think I just blacked out.
I think this is good. I think talking about golf, taking a second to talk about mountain biking, yoga, CrossFit, Krav Maga, Jeeping. I might have already said Jeeping because I love my Jeep. Being on a river, golfing. I think taking these breaks where it's okay to like see where he is, what he's on, what he did today. I think these are interesting tidbits. They help break it up. I think there's nothing wrong with a little banter talking about the golf or anything. Go ahead.
So what I'm wondering, because I know that he was, and we're going to see, I want you listener to listen with us and see how this plays out. So what I know is that he was in the middle of closing a lot of real estate transactions that were kind of a little bit wild. And he's out on the golf course, mentally sidetracked. So I knew that. Right now, I'm not hearing that that's being conveyed to the listener. And so instead of pointing out you're golfing, but you're doing all this heavy lifting and you're distracted. So I'm curious as we listen to see if I actually got this back or if I personally derailed.
Well, I'm liking the insight already. And I think that helped our listener, another podcaster as well. Let's push play and see what happens.
And I don't even know what happened because I was so angry about where we were with these deals. It was just like my golf game. It was not the best that I've played. Probably there's times where I try to do maybe too much. And maybe this was one of them, was having like a networking golfing event with 2 deals also closing that day. But at the end of the day, I say that, but we got it done. We got it all done and we got them closed. It was a bumpy ride, but we got there. What
were some of the snags? What is it? One, most people aren't closing deals right now. A lot of people are sitting on the sidelines. I'm not even going to participate in this market. I'm going to wait for everything. Like they're not structuring the whole buy side of things. So like you're already in this like elite group of not only
we're at 1443. There's having good conversation. In order to save a little bit of time, is there an advertisement on this podcast?
There is not an advertisement at this time.
Okay. I'm going to go to like the 37-minute mark where it's basically 9 minutes left and start hearing kind of what's happening, what people are thinking, how you're wrapping it up, where the conversation went. So here we go in 3, 2, 1.
A long process. And these are all kind of self-inflicted wounds by the seller. So my advice is like, just be straightforward, because if I'm the one buying your property, I'm going to walk every unit. So
this is really good info. And hopefully after you get that good info, like I am doing right now, after I got this good info, after I noticed this, now I'm going to find a way, how do I wrap this up and show what's in it for me? So hopefully after you heard him say these great tidbits, you say, man, if you're listening and you just heard him, these are the things that you need to take away from it. So like one of the benefits of doing that, wrapping up what that other person said, it's like, it clarifies that there is value. It shows what the value is. It shows what we should be paying attention to. And you want to think of it like, my listener is, and you figure out who that is, and they're going through, and you figure out what they're going through. And then you hear this thing and you're like, man, if I have a listener that's going through that, I got to show them XYZ. So you basically extract it. And then the mama bird and the baby bird, where you're like, okay, that was a great worm. Let's make sure that my baby can have this worm and digest it. I need to like give it back to them. So let's push play.
I can't imagine I can't imagine not walking every unit, buying something, and just being like, "Oh, cool."
Yeah, I hope everybody does. I've heard horror stories of people ripping out. What's that?
Yeah, that was my silence. Was
well, everybody should, because like I've even heard stories
everybody should.
Of like maintenance guys ripping pipe out of one unit that's empty to replace in another unit. So you get there and there's like no plumbing, just all kinds of stuff. So yeah, definitely whatever you're buying, you should walk every unit, get in every crawl space, get in every attic, any nook or cranny that exists, make sure you've seen it.
Oh my gosh.
I used to be super frustrated because we would have a walk team. We would go do it. And then we'd go and like try to get feedback from the team. And they're like, well, I kind of think this isn't now. So now we take pictures. We did go.
I'm going to say this. It's going to be important as any podcaster. See how I'm like already trying to relate it to our listener?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be important as any podcaster. Now the podcaster's like, oh, this isn't just if I'm in real estate. Oh, this isn't just if I'm in podcast hosting about a podcast. They're like, what Adam's about to say is relevant to me. So I think it's important for any podcaster to remember this other way of thinking. Remember the hook story offer. Mm-hmm. Also remember, tell them what you're gonna tell them. Mm-hmm. That's number 1 of 3. Number 2 of 3 is tell them. And then number 3 of 3 is tell them what you told them. So you're basically going here. You're basically saying, this is what value you're going to get. And then you give them the value. And then at the end, you say, man, this is the value that you just got. This is the knowledge that you just learned. You might start out the podcast with Kent and you're saying, today's going to be great because we're going to be talking about these valuable things. And then you talk about those valuable things. And at the end, you kind of wrap it up by saying, wow, Kent, this is just how I would do it. Kent, I loved how you said, like, let's just talk about this one. I loved how we went through your stats today, 118 up to the 300s, a little higher again this last week. And you might have had a couple spikes, but the last you checked, 340 versus 115, 118. That's pretty good. I also loved that quote that I got where you said you want to retain your listeners. I think that's really important. And I appreciate you sharing with our listener something that I never heard, which was that there's like a 30% retention and that's bad. And then what's kind of good is 30 to 70. And then what's extra smoking hot is 80% or more. And it was kind of cool. And I'm proud of you for being in the 50s and 60s. So now what I'm doing is I'm bringing it home. Mm-hmm. And then at the end, I'll basically have my listener know that the next episode is going to be a solo episode. I want to pour into you, my listener. I just want to give you some value. And every other episode is like that. This is an interview. This is me having a conversation with Julie. You're learning a lot from her story. I don't want you to go anywhere. Just stay on the podcast. I'll see you on the next episode. One of the reasons why I do something like that, because for me, I go every other is a solo and an interview and a solo and an interview. Mm-hmm. Well, I want there to be a less of a drop-off rate. And I want there to be a higher like retention rate, but also higher multiple episode rate. Mm-hmm. So here's like how I want to end today's coaching call. If we tell people, if we end it with, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then we tell them, and then we tell them what we told them, and then we give them some type of call to action. I want one of those call to actions to be, don't leave my effing podcast. Mm-hmm. It benefits them to stay. It benefits the algorithm of the podcast for you to keep the retention. And then they're getting these smoking hot, things because you're kind of wrapping it up. So basically I would let my listener know, hey, don't even go anywhere. If I tell them, ooh, that was a great episode, see you next time, then what do they feel? What they're subliminally being told, subconsciously being told is, oh, I'm supposed to end now. I need to turn off the episode. Julie or Adam just told me goodbye. So I guess I got to say goodbye. And even if they might have been thinking, oh, let's keep listening, they kind of hear this, I'll see you next time. And they're like, oh, okay. So maybe I'll go get lunch then. Maybe I'll take this time to give my friend a call. I don't want them to go and do lunch or get the friend a call. I want them to get as much value as they possibly can. So I tell them what's in it for them, that I'm going to pour into them one-on-one. It's just me. I'm going to talk to you on the very next episode. Don't go anywhere. Get the value instead of, thanks for listening. See you next time. So I want that to be you as well. At the end of this episode, I'm going to fast forward it to like the 1-ish minute mark, 2-ish minute mark. And I'm just going to see, how do you handle the end? And we'll go from there.
Right. And that will be up probably by the time this airs. It'll be up in a couple of weeks. And so that'll really give people a sense of our track record and what we're out to do as a company.
I don't like that's going to be up when this airs in a couple of weeks. I personally don't like that. I usually, actually, this might be random and you don't have to follow what I'm about to share with you. But the way that I do it is I just say, hey, Kent, let's pause there. And then I say something like this to my editor. We don't need to have any of that stuff about like the finite dates of 2 weeks and 1 week and when this is happening and when this is going to be up. You can just cut that stuff up and we'll just end it. We'll just have Kent re-say what he's saying, is just say, if you're listening, go to the website and you'll find this. Because it's just, you don't need to put it like remember the evergreen versus the,
literally just thinking that
you want it to be like your listener doesn't feel like they're missing out because they didn't hear this exactly when it came out. If they hear this and we're talking about in 2 weeks, it's going to happen. No, when this is out, it's happening. So just like, I'm not a dick about it. I'm not rude. I just say, hey, Kent, let's pause there. I don't want to put like a date on stuff. Why don't you just say, go and check it out instead of it's going to happen in 2 weeks. Like for the listener, it's already happened. So we don't need to be talking in the future, in the past, in the future, in the past. It's just weird. And we don't know how to do it. All right. I'm pushing play.
The company's grown beyond just me to now a whole host of people. It's not just me anymore. And so I think that'll give people a really good place to really understand what we're trying to do and what we've accomplished so far.
That's awesome. Absolutely fantastic. Kent, I appreciate you. I value the time that you've bestowed upon the conscious investor community.
This is great. I think it is super genuine that you appreciate Kent. And this is a silly thing. Like it seems so weird. I feel like you might say the listener and I are so grateful that you took this time and added this value, and you kind of point out the value that it came. And so it's not about Julie. It's about the listener. The listener is the one that needs to get the value. And so you genuinely want to appreciate him. I get it. But why don't you appreciate him for your listener and have the listener subconsciously, subliminally being hypnotized, being brainwashed that they're supposed to also be like, wow, I'm really glad I'm here. Hey, she's saying it for me. She's telling, yes, I am grateful. I'm glad she's telling him for me. It's a very weird thing, but I do it sometimes. I'm like, from my listener and from me, like, this was bomb. Thank you. So anyway, let me push play.
And we got to do it again. It's always a great conversation.
Yeah, always good time.
When you say we should do it again, sometimes give it a hook. Like, man, next time you're on the podcast, let's talk about how that one deal went south. Something like that. Like instead of just like, let's just have another random conversation, just like next time, I call it a cliffhanger. These are in TV all the time. They go to the commercial break when like someone's hanging on the cliff. What? Right then? When is this commercial? I don't want to miss it. And so sometimes they'll just stay. They'll stay there because they don't know how many commercials, how many minutes it's going to take. And so they were like really tuned in to what's going to happen when it comes. And if you say like, man, Julie, this has been really cool having you on the podcast. We've talked about all these things, listener drop-offs, the podcast growing, about serving your avatar, being able to spoon feed or baby bird, mama bird, this stuff, or hook story offer, a lot of value. I want to get into this other thing about you. I want to get into how did you start your real estate business? I want to get into that one mistake that I know you made. Let's talk about that on our next episode. And so this is just a cliff. Just think about it. It's not always easy, but think about it. We're almost done. We're almost done.
Live that life to your full potential. So don't leave anything on the sidelines. Let's play hard. Let's play all out and keep adventure on the trail. Until next time, live big and love even bigger. What's the
This is good stuff.
big deal about investing in apartments? Why is it better than
This is good stuff. This is a really good outro. I love it.
investing in a slew of single family homes?
This is so good. Julie, this is so good.
I've compiled a lot of information on why investing in a multifamily, also known as apartments, will help you reach your investment.
And you're speaking to an avatar. It will help you. All right, let's wrap it up. This is really good. There's pros and there's cons. But I think you've got a lot of notes that
So good. I'm like, I want to do that. I feel like I want to ditch all of my batched recordings because I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to do even better. So,
well, to my listener, don't go away. There is more value to come. I'll see you on the next episode. Oh, hey, because 3 of my clients came to me recently looking to find a way to have their podcast make the money instead of cost them money. We put together a resource for some of our clients, and I want to give it to you as well. It's something that did actually seem to help because one of them is now making $2,600 a month, another one $4,500 a month, and the third is making between $5,000 and $10,000 each month. And so it's been a resource that's been incredibly valuable to them. It's our sponsor sheet template. It's a template of a sponsor sheet, and it gives you something that you can hand to potential sponsors and hopefully also be making $2,600, $4,500, or between $5,000 and $10,000 regularly each month with your podcast. So this has been a contributing factor to helping all 3 of those clients turn their podcast into an additional income stream for them. And the way that you can find it is just going to our website, growyourshow.com, but put in /templates, growyourshow.com/templates. And then you can actually download that template and others that could be valuable to your podcasting experience. I'll see you on the next episode.